we just got done talking about GCF, factoring by greatest common factor. And greatest common factors, or GCFs, is one example of factoring by grouping. So what we're doing is we're just looking at this example, this problem, and we're grouping them together and we're saying, hey, I'm going to look at just this group and factor out what they have in common. So if I look at this 2x and 6, they both have a 2 in common. So I could take out a 2 or factor out a 2, divide out a 2, put that in front, creates a parenthesis, and so then I look to see what's left over. 2x divided by 2 is just x. 6 divided by 2 is 3, so I need to have a plus. And this is just one example of factoring by grouping. We're grouping two pieces together and then taking out what they have in common. It gets a little bit trickier when I have 4 pieces or 4 terms, and in fact this is where most factor by grouping comes from. If I have 2x to the third plus 6x squared plus 5x plus 15. Okay, we've got 4 pieces here. I look at all of the terms to see if I can take out any one thing. You know, initially I think maybe I can take a 2 out of everything, and I look here, I'm like, oh yeah, I can take out a 2, and then I get here and I'm like, ah, oh, nope, can't take out a 2. Well, what about x's? I've got 3 x's here, 2 here, 1 here, and so maybe I'm thinking, yeah, I can take out an x, but then I get to the 15, I'm like, ah, nope, can't take out an x. So I can't factor by GCF. Factor by grouping, though, is where I group 2 pieces together and then group 2 more pieces together and do GCF on just those individual pieces and just see what happens. So if I look at this first group, I can take out a 2, but they also both have x squared. So I'm going to factor out a 2x squared. When I do, it creates a parenthesis, so let's take this out. I would have x left over here plus 3 left over right there. So there's the first group. I look at the sign in between, that's a plus sign. Now looking at the second group, what do they have in common? Well, it looks like they both have a 5, so let's factor out a 5. Anytime you factor something out, it creates a parenthesis. That's going to be really important down the road. You want to get used to that. So I'm factoring out a 5, creates a parenthesis. What's left over? Well, 5x divided by 5 is just x plus 15 divided by 5 is 3. So it kind of looks like maybe that's as far as we can go. But looking at this first term now, look at this huge, long, ugly first term and this second term. Do they have anything in common? Yeah, they both have the parenthesis x plus 3. So if I were to factor that out to the front, so I've got parenthesis x plus 3. Remember, anytime you divide something out or take something out to the front, what does it create? Parenthesis. And the leftovers end up going in the second parenthesis. So if I was to take away this x plus 3 and pull it out to the front, what's left over? That's right, I've got a 2x squared left over. Plus, now I look at this second group. If I were to take out the parenthesis or factor it out to the front, what's left over? This plus 5. So my final answer here, when I was supposed to factor this, would be to say that I have parenthesis x plus 3 times parenthesis 2x squared plus 5. Let's try another one. All right, we've got another example here. We've got 4x to the third power plus 5x squared plus 8x plus 10. I quickly look to see if I can take out any GCFs. 4, 5, that means I can't take out a 2. How about x's? Nope, that doesn't have an x. So factor by grouping. We group the first 2, group the last 2. Take out what they have in common. 4 and 5, they just have a 1 in common, so we don't want to deal with that. What about x's? Yep, they've got x squared in common. So let's take out x squared. That would leave me with 4x here plus 5. Now I'm really hoping that that second thing ends up with a 4x plus 5. That way I can take them both out, but we'll see. Now we look at the second group. Looks like they both have a 2 in common, so I'm going to put a plus 2 right here. Anytime you factor it out, it creates parenthesis. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and there's still an x left. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Well, looky there. They both have the same exact parentheses, so now we factor that out to the front. That gives me parenthesis 4x plus 5. Anytime you factor something out, it creates another parenthesis. So let's take this out. What's left? X squared and plus 2. And there we go. We have just done another factoring by grouping problem. We could do some other examples. I want to do one, though, where a lot of students end up making mistakes. And that's when there's negative signs that are involved. That can kind of mess things up. So let's go ahead and kind of follow our little plan here. We take the first group and we take out the GCF, or the biggest common factor, which would be a 2 and an x squared. So if I were to take out a 2 and an x squared, that would leave me with x minus 6 divided by 2 is 3. I took out both x squared, so that would leave me with that. Okay, no issues yet. Now we go to the next group. What do they have in common? Well, they both have a 3 in common, so if I just kind of keep the same pattern going on, if I took out a 3, I may or may not be making a mistake right now. Hint, hint, look at the middle. But if I take out a 3, what would be left? Well, that would leave me with x plus 9. I divide that by 3, and I get a 3. Okay, now looking at this, are the parentheses the same? They're not. So I might have made a mistake somewhere. If I go back and look, let's redistribute this and see if I get the same thing. If I were to say negative 3 times x, that gives me negative 3x. But when I multiply this one, negative 3 times positive 3, that gives me negative 9. Okay, and that's the common mistake that I see a lot of, is anytime I'm taking out a 3, but there's a minus sign right here, you actually are taking out a negative 3, not a 3. So you got to be careful. I'm dividing this by negative 3 and getting a positive 1x, but I also have to take out a negative 3 out of this. Negative 3. So 9 divided by negative 3 is actually negative 9. And now it's working out. And I can double check that. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Okay, now I'm in business. And my parentheses are the same, so I'm pretty sure now I fixed it. I'm doing it right. So now look at these two groups. What do they have in common? X minus 3, so I take that out. Anytime you factor something out, it creates parenthesis. Good. The leftovers, so I'm going to take that out. I'm left with a 2x squared here, minus, take out the parenthesis, and I'm left with a 3. And there we go. Okay. So factoring by grouping, I could come up with more examples, but they're all going to be pretty much the same exact thing, just different numbers. Factoring by grouping, you want to group the first two, group the last two, and then just do GCF. And just keep on doing GCF until you finally get down to the end, or until there's nothing more in common. We took out a 2x squared first and got some leftovers in the parenthesis. On this one, we took out a negative 3 and got some leftovers in a parenthesis. Then we weren't done because we still had the parenthesis in common, so we took that out, and then the leftovers went in the other parenthesis. Hopefully that helps. Let me know what you think. Give this channel a subscribe and a like, and we'll see you soon.